What's something people don't know about surviving the world wars? Before we dive in, make sure to like, share and subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss a story that brings history to life. You've read the history books, watched the documentaries, and maybe even tried reenacting a few moments from the front lines. But you know, there's a side of the world wars that rarely makes it into the camera's lens or the historian's notes: the day-to-day survival of ordinary soldiers and civilians, often in conditions that modern minds struggle to grasp. Cold, hunger, disease and exhaustion weren't background details. Honestly, they were constant threats, silent enemies that claimed as many lives as bullets and bombs. Understanding how people survived these brutal realities is more than just a lesson in history. It's a masterclass in practical resilience. Today, we're going to dive deep into the methods that soldiers, medics and civilians use to endure extreme cold, scarce resources and relentless uncertainty. And, well, how you can adapt those techniques even in the modern world. How soldiers stayed warm through freezing trenches. When you think of World War I or II, the first image is often mud, machine guns and endless shells. But in truth, soldiers spent more time battling cold than they did combat. Trenches were draughty, damp and often flooded, and wood-burning stoves were rare luxuries. Soldiers quickly learned that warmth wasn't about having the biggest coat or the thickest blanket. It was about smart layering, moisture control, and creating a personal heat envelope. Wool uniforms and socks formed the first line of defence, but the real difference came from how gear was arranged. Blankets were wrapped tightly around the body, tucked beneath the lower back and feet to trap heat, and even simple items like extra shirts or overcoats were repurposed as insulation. Every gap in clothing or bedding was a potential point for hypothermia, and those who mastered these small adjustments survived longer and slept more restfully even under shell fire. Why trenches and barracks taught soldiers the power of microclimates. Life in a trench or a crowded barrack was about managing the space immediately around your body. Soldiers discovered that even a thin layer of straw, folded wool or spare blankets under the torso could block the cold rising from the frozen ground. Similarly, tucking blankets tightly around the sides prevented drafts from stealing precious body heat. These methods created what we now call a microclimate, a small, controlled environment where the air nearest the body stayed warm. The principle is simple. Air is an insulator. Trap it, control it, and your body becomes the heater rather than relying entirely on external heat sources. Medical officers from both world wars documented this extensively, noting that a well-prepared soldier could endure temperatures that would incapacitate an unprepared comrade, even if both were wearing identical uniforms. Now, let's consider how civilians manage warmth during air raids and fuel shortages. Outside the front lines, families face similar threats without the army's structured gear. During the Blitz in Britain or the bombings in German and Japanese cities, civilians dealt with blackouts, rationed coal, and, well, unheated homes. They learned to improvise using layers of blankets, mattresses, and even clothing in, some pretty unconventional ways. Beds were arranged to minimize heat loss, mattresses elevated from the floor, thick quilts pressed together, and multiple thin layers tucked around the sleeper's body. Windows were sealed with cloth and curtains doubled as windbreakers. The goal was not comfort in the modern sense, but efficiency. Heat had to stay where it mattered most, around the core of the body, because every lost degree increased the risk of illness, frostbite, or, honestly, worse. So, why did layering different materials work better than just one heavy blanket? Well, historical households rarely had matching sets of bedding. Cotton sheets, wool blankets, quilts, and even repurposed military surplus were combined not for aesthetics, but for function. Cotton provided breathability and absorbed moisture, preventing evaporative heat loss. Wool trapped air and maintained warmth, even when dampened quilts added weight to prevent movement that could break the thermal seal. Soldiers and civilians learned through trial and error that a mix of materials, carefully arranged and tucked, outperformed any single heavy blanket. You see, heat is not generated by bulk alone. It is contained by careful management of layers and trapped air. Now, let's talk about how these methods can be applied in modern survival situations. You know, you don't need a trench, a barrack, or a wartime shortage to benefit from historical thermal strategies. Whether you're sleeping in a tent, on a cot, or even just on a standard bed, the same principles really do hold. Start by insulating beneath your body and, well, use multiple layers that are just a bit different in material. Make sure to seal the sides carefully to prevent cold air from circulating. Even one well-placed blanket, properly tucked and layered, can actually outperform several loose covers. Historical knowledge shows us that smart placement and air control are the true determinants of warmth, not just the thickness of your bedding. Understanding these techniques connects us not only to the practical skills of the past, but also to the mindset of resilience that really defined an era. Soldiers, medics and civilians survived harsh conditions not because they were lucky, but because they paid close attention to details, experimented and applied common-sense strategies that, honestly, modern convenience has largely forgotten. Applying these lessons today is more than just a curiosity. It's a way to be prepared, self-reliant, and connected to history in a tangible, functional way. If you found value in this guide, don't let it stop here. Subscribe to Past Survival and share this video with someone who truly appreciates historical knowledge applied in real life. Keep these techniques alive and, more importantly, use them. The world may have changed, but human survival, ingenuity, and the wisdom of those who came before remain as relevant as ever.